Hey guys, tonight we're climbing into the steamy jungles of ancient Mesoamerica. No bug spray, no Wi-Fi, no modern distractions. Just a vast sky, 1,000 chirping frogs, and the hum of torches being lit by hands that haven't invented telescopes yet, but are about to read the heavens anyway. You're lying flat on your back atop a limestone temple, thick morning mist curling up from the canopy below. It smells like wet stone and blooming orchids. Around you, figures in woven cloaks and red pigment whisper prayers, pacing silently as they wait. They're waiting for a tiny dot of light Venus. And tonight, rather this pre-dawn, you're a time-traveling skywatcher with them. Which means, spoiler alert, you probably wouldn't last 5 minutes in their ritual heavy. Astronomy bureaucracy without accidentally planting corn during a Venus disappearance and ruining the sacred calendar. No pressure. The Mayans didn't just observe Venus. They structured lives, wars, and harvests around it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? I always love seeing who's drifting off under which sky. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sky is a mottled gray-violet, that uncertain color just before the sun remembers its job. Around you, priests whisper counts under their breath. A signal. A warning, a moment so precise, so sacred, that they built entire buildings to catch it. Venus, they've been tracking Venus for months, marking each day it rises. Each time it disappears, each odd pause in its rhythm. Others insist they were instruments carved in stone, fine-tuned for celestial choreography. Either way, it's working. Sometimes a warrior, sometimes a bringer of rain, sometimes a herald of doom. Its arrival in the morning sky was watched carefully, like a rival stepping into the room. You blink up through the mist. It tastes like roasted cacao, cinnamon, and slightly boiled leaves. A comfort drink passed around before dawn. It's meant to steady the soul and your gut before what comes next. It flickers, blinks. Then, like a shy performer at curtain call, slips behind the brightening haze. It will move behind the sun, disappear for days or even weeks, and then re-emerge on the opposite side of the sky, this time as the evening star. They had no lenses, no satellites, no orbit diagrams. What they had were sharp eyes, steady routines, and a mathematical system so precise that they calculated Venus's cycle to within a fraction of a modern error margin. That rhythm appearance, absence, return forms the heartbeat of a civilization. Repeated over 5 rounds, it aligns almost perfectly with the 365-day solar year. They noted that 5 Venus cycles equaled 2,920 days. And 8 solar years, 2,920 days as well. At the base, the plaza glows with torchlight. People are beginning to gather. Farmers, scribes, warriors. They've heard the sky has spoken, and they want to know what it said. You take it, nodding politely, and chew while staring at the eastern sky where Venus once was. You sip something warm from a gourd. Then, a stir. You lean over to see. It's a calendar, yes, but also a prediction engine. A ledger of stars and dots and lines that somehow, impossibly, tells the future. One priest lifts a hand. The others freeze. You squint and there it is. A tiny glint on the horizon, pale and shivering. It's just a pinprick of white light. But to the people beside you wrapped in jaguar pelts, painted with ochre and soot tights, everything. You glance behind you. The temple's eastern steps align exactly with where Venus has emerged. Coincidence? To chance. Historians still argue whether these alignments were purely astronomical or also ceremonial in purpose. Some believe the buildings served as temples first, observatories second. Venus, for the Maya, wasn't just a pretty light. It was a god. You feel the shift in the air as the priests mark the moment with a low chant. A new cycle begins. In a few weeks, this bright morning star will vanish from the horizon. You look again at Venus, barely visible now as the light grows. The priests nod. They've seen what they came to see. You descend the temple steps with them, careful not to slip on the dew-slick stone. A scribe lays out a folded codex on a stone slab, its pages made from softened fig bark, coated in lime paste and painted with red and black glyphs, or at least, it tries. Because here's the thing, the Maya didn't have telescopes. One fringe fact you overhear from the elder priest: the cycle of Venus's synodic period is 584 days. The Maya pegged it at exactly that. Coincidence? The priest smirks. Divine symmetry, he says. You wandered the plaza now, the crowd dispersing. Market stalls are opening. Someone offers you a tamale wrapped in banana leaf. The priest beside you says, "It will return. It always does." And it's not just comfort. It's science, math, pattern. The stars keep moving, and the Maya keep watching. The jungle wakes around you in soft layers of soundbirds testing their calls, insects clicking like clocks, and the rustle of early footsteps across the plaza. You're back atop the temple just before sunrise again, this time with a different group of priests, slightly older, slightly grumpier, and very, very focused. They are tracking Venus, and this morning, you're helping. Sort of. You've been handed a stick. A long, polished wooden rod with etchings you daren't quite understand, and one flat notch carved into the end. It's not just a stick, it's a sighting staff used to line up. Venus with a stone notch across the courtyard through a carved slit in a tower and possibly beaked between the horns of a ceremonial statue that hasn't been dusted since the last equinox. They'd note the first appearance of Venus as morning star, count the days it remained visible, then record the precise moment it vanished behind the sun. Wrong angle, off by a few degrees. You mutter an apology, and he gives you a look that says, "It's only the fate of the crops, wars, and sacred rituals, no pressure. The goal, know exactly where Venus is going to rise tomorrow." Some believe the Venus tables were partly predicted ahead, meaning even the astronomers didn't see every cycle, they just knew it should happen. The priest beside you leans forward, squints, then scribbles something onto a folded page with red pigment. You adjust the stick, you squint. You about to shout, "Got it," when one of the priests gently nudges your elbow. One dot at a time. One sunrise at a time, over months, years, lifetimes. It appears for 263 days as morning star, vanishes for about 50. Then returns for 263 days as evening star, followed by another disappearance of around 8 days. All of this adds up to 584 days, which the Mayans measured, memorized, and mirrored in their sacred cycles. Someone hands you a maize cake. You nibble it thoughtfully, letting the repetition of this strange morning routine settle into your bones. You start to understand the allure. It's not just a dot, it's a pattern. Something that doesn't lie, doesn't change, doesn't ghost you after one cloudy morning. Tracking Venus wasn't just about watching. It was about anticipating. Mayan astronomers, many of whom were also priests, kept meticulous logs of Venus's position over decades. It wasn't glamorous. It meant waking up early, staring at empty sky for hours, and sometimes, if the weather didn't cooperate, guessing. Light filters through it only during the morning star's first appearance after disappearance. And when it does, the light falls directly onto a carved glyph embedded in the corridor's far wall. Historians still argue whether Mayan Venus charts were the product of actual naked eye, astronomy, or extrapolated from previous cycles using mathematical rules. It looks simple, but every mark is the product of generations of early risers, sun watchers, and math scribblers. You steady your staff again and watch. The sky lightens, the horizon glows. You can feel the excitement ripple through the courtyard. And there it is. Today's sighting will be reported to the ruler not just for ritual reasons, but for practical planning. Venus determines planting schedules, ceremonial days, and yes, when to go to war. You glance at the line of stones stretching down the temple steps, all placed to align with Venus's rise and fall on key days. Observing wasn't passive. It was architectural. One priest draws a Venus glyph next to today's date and nods solemnly. The glyph looks like a serpent's eye, or maybe a corn kernel, or maybe just a star with legs. No buildings, no marriages. Some people fasted. Others whispered to the stars. Venus was gone but not forgotten. At its far end is a small window, really more of a slit pointed at a very specific section of sky. Venus. Just the barest blink of white on the purple-gray sky. You point your staff. That's how it happens. You step back and sit on the cool temple stone. Venus doesn't move randomly, it dances. You lie on your back now, looking up. It's light out, but Venus still lingers, faint against the rising sun. The priests gather around a bark paper codex. It's filled with columns, short vertical bars, dots, and strange spirals. Mayans didn't use telescopes. They used discipline, and sometimes even ceremonial. One fringe tidbit you overhear. In certain cities, when Venus disappeared from the sky, no one was allowed to start new projects. You wander through a narrow corridor built directly into the temple side. It's low, tight, and oddly angled. You peek through it and realize it's Venus's window. At least during one phase of its cycle. Venus enters. Venus speaks. You step out of the corridor and find yourself surrounded by courtiers, each one dressed in feathered cloaks and heavy with jewelry. You glance down at the calendar again. Dots, bars, red paint. Venus rises again tomorrow, and you'll be there to greet it with your awkward wooden stick, your half-burnt tamale, and your newfound respect for the planet that dictated an empire's rhythm. The codex rustles in your hands as you carefully unfold the long, bark paper sheetage panel covered in tidy rows of dots, bars, glyphs, and strange faces peeking out from red and black ink. You're seated cross-legged on a stone bench beside two scribes, both of whom are nibbling roasted squash seeds while calculating celestial movements with the air of accountants solving crimes. This isn't just a book, it's a celestial log, a timeline, a spreadsheet before spreadsheets were even a dream. Represent ones. Bars stand for fives. Shell symbols mean 0, yes, 0. That concept's so tricky it took other civilizations centuries longer to formalize. But the Maya, they casually integrated it into their base 20 number system like it was no big deal. The page you're looking at is dense with numbers. You watch one scribe scratch out a sequence on a clay board, then slide a stone bead along a counting cord. He mutters something about 584 and 8 solar years. And you realize you re-looking at a Venus prediction formula their way of synchronizing the morning and evening star cycles with the 365-day solar calendar. You lean in closer, trying to make sense of it. The math works like this. 5 Venus cycles equal 2,920 days. When he arrives, things begin, or things end. That's almost exactly 8 Hob years, the solar calendar cycle used by the Maya. It's a beautiful coincidence, or maybe not so coincidental when you got 3 generations of scribes checking the sky every morning for confirmation. Today's Venus sighting recorded for the future. Historians still argue whether the precision of this Venus-solar synchronization was discovered independently or inherited through contact with older Mesoamerican cultures like the Olmecs. These codiceas, rare, delicate, folded paper marvels, tracked not only days and gods, but predictions. A group of farmers are laying out maize cobs under the sun, checking their ripeness. A young woman nearby is weaving something so intricate it looks like a map. It hits you that everyone is operating on the assumption that the stars have something to say. And more importantly, that the Maya are capable of reading them. Charts of eclipses, weather cycles, star movements, and Venus. Venus got its own dedicated pages. Either way, the Maya took it further, courting it, ritualizing it, embedding it into time itself. You joke that it sounds like a cross between astronomy and jury duty. They don't laugh. They take math seriously. It's stored in a dry chamber under the temple steps, kept away from moisture, insects, and careless hands. You ask what it means. When Venus shows up early, or doesn't appear at all, or hides behind clouds for days. The scribe next to you flips to another section of the codex, this one packed with imagery. A central glyph shows a god with a star-shaped eye stepping down a celestial staircase. Someone is grinding cacao nearby. Steve the temple dog, who T really named Steve, but kind of looks like one chases a bird across the plaza. Beneath him, jaguar claws, a snake coiled around a moon, and small figures in postures of reverence or fear. Imagine being the priest who accidentally shifts the entire war calendar by a week because you mistook a planet for a cloud. That's more than most civilizations could ask for. This is symbolic astronomy, part science, part storytelling. You ask what the figure means. The scribe smiles gently and says, "That is Chak-ek, Venus, the star that brings both fortune and fire." You blink. That's vague. Others are remarkably intact, preserved with care, like someone knew the future would come looking. He nods again. Yes. You watch as the other scribe adds a new glyph to the corner of the page. A simple star nestled beside a temple. The Maya didn't just write history. They wrote patterns. You stretch your legs and look out over the plaza. You remember something one of the priests whispered this morning. When Venus disappears, the world holds its breath. You ask the scribes what happens when the math doesn't line up. One of them shrugs and says, "Then we recalculate, or we pray harder." The other one adds, "Or we blame the person who miscounted." Which, as you realize, makes their job stressful. One fringe tidbit you overhear. In some regions, Venus watchers were isolated during their counting phase, housed in quiet temples. Given special diets, and forbidden from speaking to outsiders until their observations were complete. You take another look at the codex. Some parts are so smudged, it's hard to tell where numbers end and symbols begin. The scribes begin to pack up. The codex is folded accordion style and placed in a ceramic case lined with soft cloth. Before it's tucked away, you notice one last panel, 4 numbers lined up neatly, followed by a pictograph of a darkened sun. An eclipse, one scribe says. In 327 days, You blink. You already know. He nods. The sky is just a long song. We've memorized the tune. You sit back in the dust, watching the scribes walk off. The temple bell rings in the distance. Above, the sky stretches bright and blue now, Venus long since vanished into daylight. But its numbers remain. Tucked into folded pages, etched into minds, counted on cords carved into stone. The math isn't perfect, but it's consistent. And in a world of jungle storms, shifting borders, and fiery gods, you're sitting beneath a palm leaf canopy now, sipping something cool and slightly spicy out of a carved gourd, while a storyteller older than the plaza stones probably leans forward and whispers, "Venus is not just a star, it is a messenger." You nod, unsure whether this is the beginning of a myth or just an opinion. But around here, the line is fuzzy. Because in the Maya world, Venus meant everything. You watch as the villagers prepare for the next phase in the Venus cycle. Baskets of corn are being sorted, pottery reglazed, and one man is redying his feathered tunic with the urgency of someone who definitely forgot about a festival. The planet's reappearance or disappearance triggers a chain reaction. Feast days, sacred fasts, maybe even military campaigns. Marriage, best when Venus rises in the evening. Corn planting, wait until it disappears. War. Morning star's reappearance is a good day to pick a fight. If you're feeling bold, and it's not superstition, it's timing. The Mayans believed Venus influenced when things should happen, not whether they would succeed. If Venus said it was time, then it was time, even if no one really felt like dancing that day. Venus was the sacred coordinator of the calendar. Farmers will place this at the edge of their fields once Venus disappears as a sort of promise. When the planet returns, so will the planting. Some see it as spiritual bureaucracy. Others see a practical way to unify scattered communities under one consistent cosmic plan. It's not about blessing the crop, it's about synchronizing it. A kind of interstellar scheduling agreement between humans and the gods. The storyteller continues, explaining how kings scheduled bloodletting ceremonies and ritual dances around Venus's cycles. It wasn't arbitrary. They believed sound would offend the gods while Venus was negotiating with the sun. So instead, people used hand signals. You imagine an entire town miming their way through breakfast, and suddenly the stars seem only half as powerful as peer pressure. He's practicing, or praying, or both. You turn back toward the plaza and notice a line of warriors in feathered helmets beginning a slow, deliberate march. Many Mayan texts associate this phase with fire, spear, and the unleashing of divine wrath. It wasn't about wanting war, it was about honoring the inevitable cycle of destruction and renewal. He doesn't speak for a while, just stares at the path the warriors took. They aren't headed for battle. This is a ritual reenactment. But the tension in the air says they're still taking it very seriously. Slow, steady, like orbit. You look up at a woven banner that displays today's glyph. It's a curled snake with an open mouth and a star above its tongue. You've seen it before. They happen in people, too. An ochre forming a scene of a star descending from the heavens, surrounded by maize gods and warriors with bird masks. A priest climbs it barefoot, carrying a basket of flowers and obsidian blades. You don't ask what the blades are for. You've learned that symbolic can mean many things. In the corner, someone has sketched what looks like a turtle holding a star in its mouth. Historians still argue whether the Venus-based events were timed for astrology, theology, or just to keep public order through shared expectations. You wander through the village. A group of children are playing with spinning tops carved from gourds. A few giggle as one lands near your feet and wobbles to a stop. In the distance, you hear the low thump of a drum, probably a rehearsal for the Venus return dance. Timing matters. You duck into a shaded structure where a mural is being painted layers of red. Black, you ask what it means. The painter shrugs. It's symbolic, right? You're handed a folded cloth containing beans, maize seeds, and a tiny carved Star of Venus offering kit. You walk out to one of the terraces overlooking the fields, and sure enough, small bundles dot the earth. One fringe tradition you learned from a local priest. On certain rare Venus alignments, villagers weren't allowed to speak for an entire day. You pause beside a steep staircase carved into the hillside. It leads to an elevated altar, said to be used only during Venus's highest point in the morning sky. The priest sprinkles petals at the summit, then raises his hands toward the eastern horizon, even though Venus won't rise again for days. The calendar chime rings softly through the air. It's the glyph for Venus in war form. That makes sense, given the drums. Because when Venus turns warrior, everyone holds their breath. The reappearance of Venus as morning star after its absence was believed to signal the start of conflict. You sit on the stone wall, feet dangling over the side, and watch the warriors move. They step in time with the drums. Someone sits beside you, an elder, in a cloak dotted with tiny shell beads. Then he says, "The star comes back." The sky repeats. But we are not the same. You don't know whether that's a proverb or just really good poetry. He stands and walks off, leaving you with a view of the jungle canopy, a quiet wind, and the vague feeling that Venus is watching, just not visibly. You pull the cloth bundle from your bag and leave it on the wall beside you. A few seeds, carved star, and the quiet understanding that cycles don't just happen in the sky. And the next one always starts a little sooner than expected. You climb the narrow stone path, your feet slipping occasionally on moss-covered steps as you rise toward a strange structure nestled in the treetops. It doesn't look like a temple. It doesn't look like a house. It's a squat building with thick walls, one doorway, and a rectangular slit running horizontally across the upper face like a watchful eye. You've arrived at a Mayan observatory, but not the kind filled with telescopes or spiral staircases. This one is quiet, humble, built entirely of stone and geometry. Inside, it's cool and still. The walls curve inward slightly, forming a soft cone. The floor is swept smooth, and in the center, a small polished stone rests on a raised slab. Overhead, the roof narrows to a small opening just large enough to frame a piece of sky. He wasn't looking for Venus herself, not yet, but for her predicted path. For the exact sliver of sky she would cut across when she returned. If he blinked at the wrong moment, he'd miss her. You sit. No instruments, no lenses, no dials. From here, you can see the entire plaza below. It's shaped intentionally, buildings aligned not for convenience, but for timing. One temple lines up with Venus's evening star disappearance. Another marks her morning star debut. And between them, a ceremonial causeway cuts through the jungle canopy like a gleaming line to the horizon. Just patience. It's a cross-frame in ancient alignment site. He places it on a tripod of stones and points to where the sun will rise next week. Then he shifts it slightly. Many temples were designed to frame these events and Venus simultaneously. Some doorways line up perfectly with the morning star's rise on day one of its cycle every 8 years. But the priest isn't guessing. He knows. He points to a thin line carved into the stone, running from the corner of the floor up to the window slit. The Mayans didn't track Venus by seeing her every day. Only then could you graduate and be trusted to start the count again. It wasn't about memorizing facts. It was about absorbing the tempo of the sky. Each groove has a purpose. Each opening frames a moment. You wonder how many years it took before they found the right angle. How many false starts, missed risings, cloudy nights. They tracked her by knowing when she'd come back. The trees hum with insects. A frog croaks somewhere nearby. And through a break in the branches, you glimpse the evening star just bright enough to spot, just quiet enough to miss if you're not paying attention. By memorizing a rhythm so strange, so staggered, that most people would have given up and just stared at the moon instead. It's an alignment marker calibrated for just one thing: the heliacal rising of Venus. The sun begins to dip. Shadows grow longer. The slit overhead captures one last beam of golden light, which lands exactly on the center stone inside. That's the term for when a planet reappears just before sunrise after being lost in the sun's glare. Shadow, silence. You imagine the scene centuries ago, a priest seated where you are now, cross-legged and silent, staring through that slit as the light slowly shifted with the rising sun. Historians still argue whether these observatories were used solely for planetary tracking, or if they also aligned with solar events like solstices and equinoxes. It's architecture with an astronomical agenda. A priest enters behind you and gently taps the wall. The Maya didn't name it that. They called it Chak-Ek, the great star, the warrior star, the breath before light star. You step outside with the priest and follow him to the observatory's roof. You ask how they did it, how they built such precision without tools. The priest shrugs. We watched, then we built. Simple, exhausting, brilliant. He shows you a set of notched poles bound together with vine. There, he says, that is where Venus will follow. You nod, pretending to see something you don't. It's still daylight. No stars in sight. That's the magic here. But the Maya were committed. One fringe tidbit you learn. In certain cities, the priests only train their successors after a full Venus cycle, 584 days of direct mentorship. You walk back through the observatory and trace your fingers over the carved walls. The answer? Probably a lot. You sit beneath a lintel that's been rubbed smooth by generations of skywatchers. It's not Venus this time. It's the sun, but its alignment reminds you that everything was planned, calculated, felt through the bones of stone. You step back into the jungle as twilight presses in. Venus rising again. On time. You pause, watching it glow faintly above the treetops. No telescope, no compass, no need. Just stone, and a planet that never forgets to return. The drums begin before the sun has even dipped below the horizon. You're seated near the edge of the ceremonial plaza now, legs crossed beside a ring of torchlight and incense. Smoke curls upward in slow, lazy spirals, and somewhere nearby, someone is chanting not loudly, not urgently, just a rhythmic whisper riding the beat of a wooden slit drum. It's the start of a Venus festival, and you've been invited to watch and maybe participate. You do so awkwardly, realizing too late that you've put it on inside out. He gently flips it for you, smiling without judgment. They move in slow, concentric patterns, tracing the outline of a five-pointed star on the ground. This, you're told, is a nod to the synodic path of Venus. How? It appears to draw a five-petaled flower in the sky over 8 years. A cosmic doodle the Maya tracked with unnerving precision. A young boy hands you a feathered sash and gestures for you to tie it around your waist. This isn't a rowdy celebration. Ceremonial, controlled. Venus has just vanished from the sky, and that disappearance must be marked properly. In front of you, dancers take their place, barefoot, adorned in shells, bones, and painted glyphs. Historians still debate whether this pentagram pattern was truly understood by ancient astronomers or inferred later through pattern recognition. But the choreography here suggests that someone noticed. It's etched with rows of dots and bars dates of past Venus cycles, along with depictions of rulers in elaborate headdresses pointing toward stars. Some of those rulers are shown holding weapons, others hold maize. The implication is clear. Venus brings both. That by dancing, drumming, and reciting Venus's path, they were ensuring its return like keeping time in a very long lullaby. The music swells, soft and steady. You're handed a rattle made of gourds and pebbles. You shake it once too loudly and get a playful glare from the elder beside you. He shows you how to shake it more gently with the rhythm of walking or breathing. They bow low, then rise slowly, hands raised to the stars. As the dancers spiral inward, you watch the torchlight flicker against their painted faces. The footsteps, the rattle in your hand, now moving instinctively with the others. You're not performing. You reparticipating in a cosmic schedule that was written long before you arrived and will continue long after you leave. One wears a jaguar mask with glowing red dots for eyes. Another carries a staff shaped like a serpent. Their costumes echo Venus's dual nature, beauty and danger, fertility and war. You lean closer to ask why the festival is happening now, when Venus isn't even visible. A priest leans toward you and whispers, "That's why we dance. We must remind the sky we remember." It's not worship, it's memory. Collective, embodied memory. The priest gestures toward a tall stone stele at the edge of the plaza. The music resumes, softer now, like the end of a lullaby. Numbers. A few dogs curl up near your feet. Somewhere, a parrot squawks sleepily, not with math or glyphs, but with presence. With attention, promises. Offerings are placed on the altar. Cacao feathers, painted pottery, folded paper with tiny glyphs scrawled in red. You notice that many of the children are watching the stele as if waiting for it to speak. The plaza begins to empty, but no one fully leaves. They just drift to the edges, still glancing upward. Is what the Maya understood best. They are to be kept company. One fringe belief you hear. Some Maya thought Venus could hear, not in a literal sense, but symbolically. Even the drums still. For a long, reverent moment, the only sound is the crackle of torches. It just needs to be witnessed. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the rhythm soak in. The drums, the dancers shift now, forming lines that face east, except there are no stars. Not yet. The night is still creeping in, and the first glimmers of light are only just beginning to wink through the deepening blue. And then, like a slow breath, Venus appears. It's faint, gentle, almost shy, but it's there. Right on cue, you hear the breath escape the crowd as one, and a hush falls over the plaza. You look up at Venus, bright and small above the trees. She's made her return. The dancers bow again and begin to move backward, as if retreating to make space for the star. You ask what's written on them? One boy shrugs and says, "Dates." You place your rattle gently beside the others and sit back. And in the sky, Venus climbs higher, steadier, unblinking. realize you've been tracking her too. That, perhaps, the stars aren't just to be measured. You lie on the stone and let the cool night seep through your back. The sky doesn't need applause. And tonight, the whole village was watching. You wake slowly to the sound of corn being ground nearby stone against stone, a dull rhythmic scrape like someone trying to file down time itself. Morning has returned, and with it, the soft yellow glow that seeps through woven reed walls and lights up every dust mote in the room. Venus is long gone, swallowed once again by the daylight. It tastes like sunrise. You stretch and sit upright, blinking sleep from your eyes as someone offers you a cup of atole warm, sweet, thick with maize and honey. Today's lesson, your guide tells you, won't be about stars or festivals. It's about math. These are not decorative. They're Mayan calculation tools, known as quipu in the Andes, but bearing regional counterparts here. Some use embedded shells or carved beads in place of knots, but the concept is similar. Tactile mathematics. You follow him through a maze of hanging cloth and drying chili strings to a quiet room, filled with counting cords-long strands of knotted fiber, each loop holding its own secrets. The man in charge, an old scholar with ink-stained fingers and the expression of someone who once tried to count all the grains in a granary, sits you down beside him. He hands you a cord and a small wax tablet. "Let's calculate Venus," he says, with a grin that suggests this is going to take a while. You begin by learning the basics of vigesimal counting that's base 20, unlike our base 10 system. The Maya used dots for ones, bars for fives, and a shell symbol for 0. It's elegant, compact, and beautifully logical once your brain agrees to stop thinking in tens. Your first test. Match the 584-day Venus cycle across several calendar systems. You draw it out slowly, but the consensus is clear. Mayan astronomy wasn't isolated guesswork, it was deeply mathematical. 584 days equals 1 Venus cycle. 5 Venus cycles equals 2,920 days to 2,920 days equals 8 Hob years. They could name the exact day she would rise or vanish decades into the future. They were strategic. Some cities used Venus events, especially the morning star's return, as triggers for military action. Texts describe campaigns launched only after a specific interval tied to Venus's cycle. Victories were more symbolic than tactical, but the timing was sacred. 8 Hob years also equals 13 Zocan rounds. This alignment wasn't just fun with numbers, it allowed priests to predict Venus appearances with eerie accuracy. Historians still argue whether these predictions were universally used across the Mayan regions or confined to certain city-states with more advanced scribal schools. You pause to rub your temples. Even with your modern mind, you're starting to sweat. Now, the scholar says, add a war cycle. Excuse me? Around him, 584 dots. It's subtle, but meaningful. Every dot is a day in Venus's cycle. Every dot counted. That's where the base 20 system began. Hands and feet turned divine. He explains that some Venus calculations weren't just astronomical. You count like someone from the north, he says. Always trying to round things. Most scholars dismiss it as folklore, but it still makes for excellent fireside storytelling. You scribble down the intervals, watching how patterns emerge. The plaza is alive again, women weaving under shade. Children balancing maize on their heads, not visible, maybe, but remembered, repeated. Whispered a man reciting dates while carving a new glyph onto a doorframe. The planet disappears for 8 days. It reappears as morning star. stays visible for 263 days, then vanishes again, reappears as evening star after 50 days. Venus's path isn't just tracked, it's lived. Shines for 263 more days, then vanishes, completing the loop. Each segment became a ritual window, a moment to act, to wait, to remember. Some temples had entire walls dedicated to these breakdowns. Your guide shows you a mural where a warrior stands on a star, lifting a serpent spear above his head. One fringe tidbit: you hear whispers about a missing calendar fragment, lost in the jungle centuries ago, that supposedly predicted an impossible Venus transit thousands of years before Western astronomers noticed it. Back in the math room, you notice one boy counting with his fingertips and toes 20 digits, just like the calendar. You begin to see numbers everywhere, carved into temple stairs, etched onto ceramic bowls, painted onto seed jars. As you leave, the scholar pats your shoulder. Fair enough. You step outside into the daylight, blinking against the sun. You look up. The sky is blank now, meanest to spot, but you realize the numbers are still there. You murmur 584 under your breath and smile. You're starting to think like a star counter. The jungle path winds under towering ceiba trees, their buttress roots flaring out like sleeping dragons. You duck under vines and step over low stones, guided by a boy with a jade pendant who keeps looking back to make sure Yuri not getting lost, or maybe just making sure Yuri's still breathing in this heat. He says he's taking you to the scribes. The entrance is shaded by hanging fabric, and inside the light is amber and filtered. The walls are covered in glyphs, and the scent of ink and crushed flowers clings to the air. They're not painting for decoration, they're recording Venus data. You arrive at a quiet structure, low, rectangular, partially buried in moss and blooming orchids. He hands you a long folded codex and gestures carefully to a series of symbols repeated down the page. A 4-petaled flower, a smoking eye, a glyph shaped like a twisted rope. Each one marks a different event in Venus's cycle, cross-referenced with Tisocan ritual days and Hop calendar positions. Here, scribes work in near silence. You hear only the occasional scratch of bone stylus on bark paper, or the squish of pigment being mixed in tiny shell bowls. You're watching the planet move through time, not sky. You trace them gently. One looks like a serpent, another like a maize seed, and another like a half-closed eye. One scribe motions for you to sit, appearing just a day late or brightening unexpectedly. When that happens, it's said to be a sign of change, not punishment, just a shift in rhythm. The scribes don't believe that literally, but they always check twice, just in case. But most agree, these weren't random doodles. They were serious science, gorgeously illustrated. A sacred almanac of Venus, war, and wonder. Each god is tied to a different Venus phase. There's one for birth, one for silence, one for war, one for love, and one who just sleeps in a hammock, waiting. He says it's today. Not just in your time here, but in the Venus cycle that's being tracked. You're right on the edge of another disappearance. That explains the quiet tension in the air. It was about maintaining cosmic balance. If a date passed without being marked, if a star rose without being witnessed, it could unweave the harmony between sky and earth. This, he tells you softly, is the Dresden Codex, or at least a copy of its kind. The section you hold. A Venus table. You follow it with your eyes, watching as glyphs change from flowers to flames, to masks, to feathers, and back again. Faint glyphs that were once painted over, but not erased. They're preparing for the next cycle, double-checking that the math lines up, assuring the tables account for precession, intercalation, and the odd hiccup in the calendar. It's part astrology, part astronomy, and part eternal to-do list. Hundreds of rows and columns, each mapping the exact days Venus appears, vanishes, and returns, over and over again. No telescope. Just math, memory, and moonless patience. Historians still argue how widespread these codices were, and whether every city-state maintained its own version, or if only a priestly elite guarded the cosmic books. You choose a curling symbol that means path or maybe wind, depending on its context. The scribe nods approvingly. You follow one line of glyphs down the page. It's mesmerizing. The scribe beside you dips his stylus in red ochre and draws a line through one particular date. A second scribe brings you a drinking bowl with symbols etched around its rim. That's Venus as trickster, the scribe says, almost smiling. Apparently, there's a lesser-known tradition, almost never spoken, outside the scribal guild, that Venus sometimes plays jokes on the calendar. One fringe belief even says that Venus moves on purpose, that she's not a rock in space, but a being testing your attention span. You're shown another codex, a rarer one, with images of gods stacked atop each other like puppets. That last one is your favorite. The head scribe explains that keeping Venus records wasn't just about astronomy. He gestures to the wall, where the entire Venus cycle is painted in a slow loop around the room like a ribbon. Somewhere near the end, a cracked section reveals an underpainting jaw layer beneath a layer. You point to them, curious. Ah, the scribe says, those were the old dates. The world changed. We adjusted. Even the stars, it seems, need updates. You're handed a stylus and invited to trace one glyph on a scrap of mate paper. You chose a good one. Venus always returns by the path. You sit quietly after that, watching them work. It's meditative, like watching monks illuminate a manuscript with candlelight and infinite patience. You realize they aren't just copying old records. As the day wanes, the scribes begin to hum low, droning tones that match the rhythm of their ink strokes. It's not a song exactly, more like a breath shared across time. You close your eyes and imagine Venus herself listening from the edge of the sky, amused, flattered, and perhaps a little smug. After all, few stars get this kind of attention. You're woken by a breeze that smells of limestone dust and blooming agave. This time, there's no ceremony, no chant, no codex waiting. Just a hike. Today, your guide says, you're going to climb to the roof of the world door, at least to the top of the tallest pyramid in this region. You groan softly, stretching limbs still sore from yesterday's scribe sitting. Your breath becomes shallow, your thighs begin to shake, and just as you're considering faking an ankle injury, you reach the summit. The climb is steep. Narrow steps rise in uneven bursts, and you're forced to lean forward with each stride, using your hands like a cautious mountain goat, and then silence. Spread out before you is a panoramic view of the Mayan world. Thick jungle stretched to every horizon, rivers flashing silver under the morning sun, and scattered ruins just peeking through green canopies like forgotten stone memories. You sit, trying not to think about the climb down. Your guide joins you, carrying a folded piece of bark paper and a polished stone disc. He places them carefully on the flat stone beside you and grins. Today's about understanding how these high places weren't just showy temples. They were calendrical tools. One notch points to where Venus reappeared last cycle. Another notch worn smooth from use marks her vanishing point. Now, he says, we check the sky. There's nothing to see yet, just blue and a few wisps of cloud. But that doesn't matter. It's a sky diary, hand-drawn, noting when Venus disappeared last, how many days she stayed gone, and which Catena 20-year period those events fell within. He shows you the disks lightly concave with notches along the edge. It's a horizon sighting device lined up with key rising points for the Sun, Moon, and, yes, Venus. At first, they seem decorative. Then you realize they line up with solstice, sunrises, equinoxes, and one groove that doesn't align with any solar point at all. But from here, you can see how practical it would have been. Unobstructed sky, maximum precision. You'd never mistake a star for a torch or a cloud for an omen. He places the disk flat, then aligns the notches with the line of distant hills. You peer along the edge and imagine the light cresting the ridge. Historians still argue whether such pyramid-top tools were widely used, or if they were symbolic rituals for elites. But so their bones would feel the movement of the sky from above, forever aligned. It's a token. He tells you to hold it whenever you feel off track or lost in thought. The clouds shift slowly, casting shadows across the treetops. A hawk circles above, then vanishes into a pocket of wind. Venus, you realize, doesn't just move in cycles. She teaches patience. Disappearance is not abandonment. Gaps are not mistakes. Venus, after all, always returns to the same sky. Your guide opens the bark paper. This pyramid, he says, was not just sacred bit, was a celestial clock tower. You glance around the summit and notice small grooves carved into the stone floor. Your guide stands and begins the descent, slow and steady, letting you linger. That one's for her, your guide says, pointing to the eastern groove, where humans wait, wonder, and keep track of stars that seem to disappear but never truly leave. Venus, you sit beside it, fingers tracing the groove's path toward the hazy horizon. Suddenly, this doesn't feel like sightseeing. It feels like waiting. He offers you a small clay tablet incised with a glyph that loosely translates as star path. One fringe belief, he adds, is that some high-ranking astronomer priests were buried atop pyramids. Not to be closer to the gods, it's poetic. You lie back on the sun-warmed stone, feeling gravity pulled gently downward while your eyes are pulled upward. The moment stretches, unhurried. You begin to hear a quiet, imagined ticking the rhythm of planetary return. The Maya didn't panic when Venus vanished. They prepared for her. They climbed pyramids, scratched glyphs, hummed dates, all to honor the space between sightings. That's where meaning lives, in the silence before reappearance. The sun climbs higher. Heat shimmers over the stone. You stay a little longer, letting your hand rest on the eastern groove. It doesn't vibrate. It doesn't whisper. But it points true. You rise, stretch, and begin the journey down not just the pyramid, but back into the days between Venus sightings. You've returned to ground level, your legs rubbery and slightly sunburned, but your mind feels light, maybe from the climb, maybe from brushing fingers against cosmic clockwork. Either way, you're starting to see time differently now. It's not as a straight line, but as a loop with rhythm, pauses, returns. Still, one question nags at you. Here, the elders gather not in silence, like the scribes, and not in spectacle like the dancers, but in slow, serious discussion. You sit among them, the only one fanning yourself with a palm frond. Drums carved, offerings set, calendars aligned. But on that morning, the sky remained dark. What happens when Venus doesn't behave? Your guide leads you into a shaded portico near the edge of the city. A storyteller begins, his voice raspy and precise. He tells of a time long ago when Venus rose late. The priests had predicted her reappearance on the third day of Cain. Preparations were made. 1 day passed, then 2. No Venus. The people grew nervous. Should they delay the ceremony? Was it a sign of disfavor? Should the king postpone his speech? Historians still argue whether this specific delay was recorded astronomically or if it was more ceremonial mythology. But similar records exist. Venus appearing off schedule or seen too early, challenging the priesthood's authority. If Venus failed to appear, sometimes they'd stage her appearance using polished mirrors, lighting effects, or even painted screens rolled open at the appointed hour. And here's where things get interesting. It has a hairline crack across it, intentional, the elder says. A way to mark imperfection. Even the stars slip. Carvings along the walls show Venus glyphs, paired with different weather notations, little swirls for wind, dots for rain, claw marks for storms. His notes, still faintly visible, seem part frustration, part poetry. I know she was there, one line reads, but the sky had other ideas. You re-shown a clay plaque from a neighboring city with a glyph meaning war postponed. It seems they had planned a small conquest to coincide with Venus's rise as morning star. If she didn't rise, it meant the gods had withheld consent. Venus, if she's up there, is hiding well. Even if the math said Venus should rise today, if she didn't do 2 clouds atmospheric haze, or human error, then the event was spiritually null. The cosmos wasn't on paper. It was in the sky. True, doubtful. But memorable, but the planet didn't show. So, they called it off. A matter of altitude and bragging rights, apparently. It's escalated into one of the silliest wars on record, mostly name-calling and decorative headgear theft. No star yet. Just waiting. There was logic to this. Venus's appearance wasn't just symbolic, was believed to open windows of cosmic permission. One fringe story claims a priest faked a Venus sighting to keep the war on schedule and was promptly struck by lightning 2 days later. The elders describe how observation trumped calculation. You sip a sour tamarind drink while they show you a backup method. Symbolic reenactment. The ritual would proceed, but gently. No major declarations, no warfare. Just prayers for realignment. You're handed a fragment of jade etched with Venus glyphs. Later that afternoon, you wander into a small chamber where astronomers once waited out cloudy nights. One priest recorded cloud-obscured Venus 16 times in one season. This isn't failure, it's awareness. You lean against the stone and look upward. The sky is overcast now, gray and soft-edged. And yet, the elders continue their calendar prep. The children still rehearse songs for tomorrow's festival. No panic, just adjustment. The idea that certainty is flexible feels deeply Mayan. You return to the storyteller, who's now recounting a tale where 2 rival cities both claimed Venus appeared above them first. Another story tells of a scribe so devoted to Venus that when she vanished early one year, he fasted for 3 days and carved a tiny stone planet to fill the gap. When Venus finally reappeared, he said, "She was only late because I missed her too much." You chuckle, realizing it's not just astronomy, it's affection. Venus wasn't just tracked. She was loved, worried over, counted like a long-distance relative. Her lateness wasn't just inconvenient, was felt. As night approaches again, you stand near a half-ruined platform and stare into the darkening east. You whisper to the sky, "It's okay if you're late," and somehow, that feels exactly right. You wake early, so early, the stars are still dusting the heavens and the jungle is hushed. As if even the howler monkeys agree it's too soon to start yelling. Today is about, Rala specifically, the 4 dramatic roles that Venus plays in her celestial cycle. And like any diva, she changes costume often. Your guide hands you a bowl of warm cacao and a folded textile embroidered with 4 symbolic glyphs. These, he says, are her faces. You sit beneath a sloping, thatched roof, watching dawn stretch thin fingers across the treetops, and begin your slow walk through Venus's transformations. The first role, Morning Star. This is her boldest form: warrior, messenger, herald of change. Cities would bang drums, light incense, and sometimes begin campaigns of conquest on her arrival. When Venus reappears after disappearing behind the sun, she does so just before dawn, low and bright in the east. It's believed that kings born under morning star Venus claimed a divine edge, destined to lead, or at least to get excellent sky publicity. This moment was treated with solemnity. The gods were said to be reabsorbing her light, calling her home. No decisions were made. It was a time for fasting, not feasting. You remember the carved stele you saw yesterday? Many bore inscriptions of morning star dates tied to political declarations, marriages, battles, and even coronations. If morning star is the drumbeat, evening star is the lullaby. She stands beside May's gods and moon spirits. Not a warrior here, but a guide. This form of Venus was associated with love, introspection, artistic expression, and agriculture. This time, for around 50 days, the second disappearance. This gap is longer, quieter, less dramatic. Others say this time marked the opening of trade seasons as the skies cooled and harvests stabilized. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic or if astrological charts actually influenced leadership succession. Either way, the timing mattered. Then comes her first disappearance, inferior conjunction, in modern terms. People paid more attention to signs, omens, and the stars that remained. Venus vanishes from view for around 8 days, lost in the glare of the sun. In some cities, special quiet rituals were held to mourn her absence. No music, no war, no major ceremonies. A kind of cosmic pause button. The second role begins. Evening star. After disappearing, Venus reemerges in the west, just after sunsets. Softer, calmer, and more reflective. You visit a painter's workshop where they restoring a mural of Venus as evening star, her hair long, her hands cupped around a glowing flower. Some believe women's rites of passage, especially coming-of-age ceremonies, were tied to this Venus phase. Each phase marked different social permissions. When to plant, when to marry, when to fight, when to reflect. And then, Venus disappears again. Many simply waited. You sit beside a priest who explains that during this final gap, dream interpretation rituals were common. With Venus hidden, the soul wandered further. One fringe belief says this was when Venus walked underground, passing through ancestral caves, blessing bones and seeds for rebirth. So the wearer always remembered where they stood in her cycle. You trace her cycle with a stick in the dirt. Alarm clocks instead of star risings. Deadlines instead of conjunctions. Gives morning star, gives disappearance. One child wears the morning star. Mask upside down and insists it makes her more powerful. Gives evening star, gives disappearance. It adds up. 584 days total. A rhythm older than clocks. Explaining that Venus's cycle is also mirrored in human emotions: hope, waiting, reflection, loss. You sit beneath a tree with bark like cracked leather, and watch the western sky. A flicker, so the story begins again. She took her time, but she returned. A single pinpoint of light, shy and soft, and return. The planet wasn't just seen, it was felt. Venus's reappearance in the east restarts the loop. Okay, and the Maya weren't just tracking this for fun. Your guide taps the textile again, pointing at the embroidered symbols. At the center, a handprint. Small, delicate, pressed into wet plaster centuries ago. A flame for morning star, a hollow circle for disappearance, a flower for evening star, a coiled snake for the final vanishing. These were stitched into priestly garments, he says. You nod, thinking of how modern life has drifted so far from celestial cues. Yet here, every phase still matters. You walk through a stone hallway where Venus glyphs are carved in a spiral, slowly shrinking inward. Perhaps a young scribe. Perhaps someone trying to say, I was here, and I saw her shine. The hallway exits into a courtyard where children are painting Venus masks, siege representing a phase. No one corrects her. You smile. In a nearby alcove, a woman traces glyphs into clay as the sun sets again. Evening star is back. She never rushed. And the temple courtyard is hushed tonight. Incense smolders low in carved stone bowls, casting lazy spirals into the moonless air. You're seated on a woven mat, alongside a group of villagers in ceremonial dress-white cotton tunics, jade earrings, painted feet. Everyone is waiting. You're here to witness a ritual timed to Venus, not the kind with wild dancing or fire jumping. This one's quiet. Intricate, deliberate. It's part of a long tradition of celestial schedule keeping, where every chant, every footstep, every cup of cacao poured is aligned with the sky's rhythm. A gong sounds a soft one, more like a bronze cyan. A priest steps forward, holding a small obsidian mirror. He raises it toward the heavens and begins to chantle not loudly, but with a cadence that sounds like he's sensing his breath to planetary orbits. You glance around, nobody moves. Even the toddlers are still. Then, a movement. Two assistants approach with bundles wrapped in red cloth. They unwrap a set of mathematically arranged offerings for feathers. 13 seeds, a coil of dyed thread. All arranged according to Venus's current position in her cycle. The priest places them at the altar's corners with clockmaker precision. Historians still argue whether these offerings held symbolic value, numerical importance, or both. But most agree the Maya were obsessed with precision and Venus's cycle, with its near-perfect 584-day loop. Gave them something to synchronize life to better than any sundial. Now, a bowl is passed to you. You're to drink from its mild cacao, flavored with chili and honey. A bit unexpected, but warming. This act, the priest explains in a whisper, symbolizes inviting the sky into your body, a tiny moment of cosmic hospitality. Next comes a story. Not just any story, this one is part of the ritual itself. It's about two twins who race Venus across the sky. One runs by day, the other by night. They try to beat her, to catch her light, but they never do. Instead, they grow old chasing her. Their bones become stars. Their laughter becomes thunder. One fringe interpretation says this tale is about the futility of rushing, the wisdom of pacing yourself. Venus was never meant to be codedly watched, waited for, trusted. You sit quietly, absorbing the tale, as dancers begin to move around the perimeter. Slow, spiraling steps. Their feet make no sound. They don't dance to drums, but to intervals every fifth breath, every seventh step. Even their sways align with glyph-taught geometry. This isn't entertainment. It's embodied calendar work. Your guide leans close and points to a nearby stone platform. He explains that once, ceremonies like this marked everything: harvests, kingship, trade season openings, even sacrifices. But don't worry, tonight is just symbolic. You exhale slowly. Still, you can't ignore the mural behind the altar. Venus rising as morning star, flanked by two figures, one lifting a flower, the other holding a blade. It's ambiguous, beautiful, and faintly unsettling. The dual nature of Venus, bright and terrible, was not lost on the Maya. She brought fertility and war, love and death. And so the rituals were always careful, always balanced. Too much exuberance, and you risked tipping the sky out of harmony. Tonight, though, all is gentle. The priest now places a single corn husk, tied with blue string, at the altar's center. This marks completion. A phase of Venus has ended. A cycle is fulfilled. You didn't hear any clocks. No bells rang. But somehow, the timing felt perfect. Historians still debate how the Maya managed such astounding consistency across centuries and regions. How did cities with no contact align their rituals to Venus within days of each other? Some suggest traveling priesthoods. Others think it was sheer math. But part of you suspects something simpler. They paid attention. No smartphones, no schedules pinned to fridges, just sky memory. And the sense that when a planet returns, the people should be ready. As the ritual winds down, you're handed a small keepsake, a bead carved with a Venus glyph wrapped in a strip of bark. You're told to carry it through your next cycle, whatever that means to you. You pocket it, feeling its smooth edges and invisible weight. The stars shimmer above as the last chant fades into silence. A frog croaks. A breeze stirs the incense smoke. Life continues. You lie back on the cool stone and whisper to no one. Let it all be in time. And just like that, the ritual ends not with fireworks, but with precisioned calm. Morning again. But this time, you're not up with the priests or out under temple shadows. You're at a low wooden table, huddled with scribes. Not the dreamy, chant-writing kind. These are the number crunchers. The math heads of the Maya world, and you're here to learn how they wrote, like astronomers with a flair for drama. At first, it looks like art. But then he draws a simple shell. The scribe beside you dips a reed into dark ink and begins drawing glyphs, beautiful, looping, and wildly unlike anything your sleepy modern brain calls a number. That shell means 0. And here, you pause. Because the Maya weren't just skilled timekeepers, they were among the earliest known civilizations to conceptualize and use 0. But the Maya definitely ran with it. 0 wasn't an abstract idea to them. It had shape, symbol, purpose. Without it, you couldn't calculate Venus's full 584-day cycle across generations. You couldn't T-align rituals or know when she'd rise as morning star 4 years from now. Historians still argue whether their invention was independent or influenced by earlier cultures like the Babylonians. 13.0. 7. Each number in the series marks a magnitude of time: days, months, years, centuries. Your scribe explains. Every calendar, every planet tracking table depended on this shell. You ask how they organized such large numbers without, spreadsheets. Each dot is 1. Each bar is 5. And each level of the stack increases by a power of 20. He chuckles and begins drawing vertical stacks, dots and bars. A 13 wasn't just 13, it echoed back to creation myths, divine orders, and cycles of birth and destruction. So when they calculated Venus's next appearance, they weren't just predicting light in the sky, they were timing the echo of the universe, base 20, not base 10. That her orbit was a kind of celestial language, and deciphering it brought you closer to understanding fate itself. The spacing is perfect. The math adds up. Despite the age of the document, there's not a single correction. So while your brain screams for a calculator, the scribe casually logs the current long count, date something like 12.19. Your eyes cross instantly, but after several shaky attempts, you almost, maybe get it. And all of it works thanks to those little shells tucked in as placeholders. You watch him copy from a codex a grid of numbers, tracking Venus's cycle for over 100 years. The level of precision makes your own calendar keeping feel a bit. This one has concentric rings, like a calendar that spins. The outer ring is the 365-day solar year. The inner ring is Venus's 584-day cycle. With reverence for small numbers and long spans of time. Squishy. But here's the part that really gets you. They weren't just counting days. Each number carried spiritual meaning. One fringe inscription even suggests certain priests believed Venus spoke through numbers. You don't need to remember all this, he says. You just need to notice. No pressure. The scribe hands you a test. He draws 2 Venus cycles in base 20 notation and challenges you to align them with a 260-day ritual calendar. Then he pulls out a small carved stone, disc much like the one you saw atop the pyramid. And when you turn them slowly together, you see that every 8 solar years, Venus returns to almost the exact same point in the sky like an astronomical reunion. The Maya knew this. They built temples around it. They used tools like this to synchronize their civilization to the sky. You glance at your modern wristwatch and feel vaguely embarrassed. The scribe, seeing your awe, smiles gently and taps the table. That's the wisdom here. Not that the Maya invented zero. Not even that they tracked Venus across centuries. But that they did it with attention. With curiosity. As you rise to leave, the scribe gives you a folded slip of bark paper with 3 glyphs. A dot, a bar, and a shell. 1, 5, and 0. He winks. Balance. You step outside and glance skyward, not expecting anything to appear, but quietly hoping. Not because you need it, but because now you understand how deeply the act of watching can mean. You're up high again, perched on a temple balcony as the jungle exhales another humid afternoon. Birds chatter, a monkey swings by, and beneath your feet, stone glyphs stretch in a long row of celestial storytelling. You've followed Venus for weeks, now through chants, calendars, rituals, and disappearing acts. And today, you finally ask the question, how accurate were the Maya really? The answer? Startling. Modern astronomers have confirmed that the Venus table in the Dresden Codex, compiled centuries before telescopes existed, matches the true synodic cycle of Venus. 584 days, with an error of only about 2 hours over 500 years. 2 hours. That's better than your last flight delay. Others think it may have included corrections from even older civilizations or external influences we haven't fully uncovered. Historians still argue how they achieved this precision. Some believe it was observation refined over generations, a kind of civilizational data collection. But the results stand. And now you're seeing them etched into stone. A long, unbroken line of Venus glyphs, each one carefully placed to reflect her appearances and disappearances. The glyph for morning star shows a rising plume. The one for evening star resembles a curled fern. There's a symbol resembling an eye closed in sleep. That's the disappearance. You run your fingers across them, imagining the thousands of sunrises and sunsets watched to get this data right. And it wasn't just Venus. Honestly, who hasn't fudged a resume? The Maya tracked eclipses, solstices, Mars, the Moon, and even the Pleiades. Some temples have alignments so precise they still mark equinoxes with a slash of sunlight across a stone snake's back. And it hits you. We had to tweak our system multiple times to stay aligned with the solar year. Leap years, Gregorian reforms. They didn't invent zero until long after the Maya. She's almost done with her current cycle. No apps, no telescopes. Just sky, stone, and stubborn devotion. Here, a priest shows you a column of predictions tied to Venus that ... well, don't quite pan out. The carving is elegant, bold. They moved like stars, each step matching a celestial calculation. A date noted for celestial blessing turned into a year of drought. A predicted return of Venus clashed with actual lunar records. But to be fair, they didn't get everything perfect. You duck into a shaded archive where half-crumbling codices lie like fossilized libraries. Others point out inconsistencies in the dance's logistics, but the story lived and was carved in stone. One scholar called this calendar drift. Another, more generously, said it showed the Maya understood mythic time where symbolic meaning outweighed exactness. You sip hibiscus water and wonder, do modern calendars ever make that kind of space for meaning? They looked up night after night and trusted their eyes, their math, their myths. One fringe theory suggests the Maya sometimes adjusted their records retroactively to make predictions look more accurate. A little historical editing, if you don't hold it against them. You're handed a chart comparing the Gregorian calendar to the Maya long count. Venus hangs above like a dot from one of those glyphs you've now memorized, but shining, and yet we call them ancient. Perspective is a strange, shifting thing. You lie back on the stone floor as a guide traces a constellation in the sky above Venus glinting low in the west. Just past sunset. Your guide points to a nearby stele, where a king once recorded his alignment with Venus. As justification for a grand ceremony, he predicted her rising. Got it right. Thousands came to watch. A comet happened to streak past the same week. Talk about lucky branding. That night, the king ordered a ceremonial dance performed by 260 masked performers, one for every day in the sacred calendar. Did it really happen exactly that way? Historians debate it, of course. Some say the comet was added to the story later, and that's its own kind of truth. You breathe in the night air, and it smells of pine smoke and something sweet burning copal resin, perhaps. Not perfect, not infallible, but consistent. Not divine, but respected as if she were. The Maya didn't wait for science to prove their world mattered. You're starting to feel the same way. You're seated on the temple steps, legs crossed, watching Venus rise. No chants, no scribes, no elaborate rituals tonight, just you, the stars, and the sound of distant insects tuning up for their nighttime concert. You've followed the cycle, watched Venus vanish, return, vanish again. Tracked her across glyphs, codices, temple doors, and now here she is, punctual as ever, gleaming just above the tree line. They called her Chak-Ek, Great Star. Not because she ruled over the gods, not because she made people rich, but because she came back. always, they didn't just see Venus as a light. They saw her as a promise. Your thoughts drift toward the people who lived this cycle, not just the kings and priests, but the timekeepers, farmers, children peering at dawn through hut doorways. A superstition, maybe, but also kind of poetic. A few nights ago, you overheard an elder tell a child, "If Venus comes back, so will your luck." Venus was consistency in a shifting world, a world of jungle storms, rival cities, long dry spells. When everything else changed, she didn't. The people felt Venus's cycle in the rhythm of their year, even if they couldn't name the math behind it. The temple's bulk holds the day's sun like a memory. Somewhere below, a carved calendar counts down to the next morning star appearance. Another generation will mark it. Another ceremony. Another whispered myth. You stretch, and the stone beneath you hums faintly with warmth. Historians still argue how much the average Maya person really understood about all this. Was astronomy common knowledge? Or was it priestly lore, passed down only in darkened observatories, not deciding coronations? Just, Venus brightens one more notch, as if to remind you she's still there. Noticing? One theory suggests oral storytelling played a bigger role than glyphs. Your last thought is not about orbits or math or codices, but about stillness. How much of history is made not by action, but by quiet watching? You like that, always in rhythm, barely breathing as the last notes of the jungle night settle into place around you. But you smile anyway. You look up. Maybe a child's, maybe a student's, maybe someone who just wanted to say, "I noticed, Venus winks just a flicker." Maybe a trick of the atmosphere. Not needing your attention, but grateful for it nonetheless. Earlier today, you stumbled across a crumbled staircase and spotted something, a Dan-etched handprint, barely visible, smaller than your own. And here you are now, not predicting wars. The night deepens, a breeze nudges the trees. A chorus of frogs begins low and slow. The stars above shift a little, like a giant sleepy yawn overhead. Still keeping time. Still beautiful without asking to be. Without algorithms, people could sit beneath the sky and know when to plant, when to wait, when to hope again. Still reliable in a world that rarely is. And as your eyes begin to close, you drift. Deep in the forest, a drumbeat begins again, a slow, steady thump like a heartbeat under leaves. But you don't need to follow it. You've already made the journey, and so does the planet. Just enough to feel the curve of the earth holding you. Always in motion. You're still now. The air is thick with calm, warm stone under your back. Stars scattered above like chalk dust dreams. Venus gleams gently in the sky's corner. It's okay if you don't remember the numbers, the dates, the glyphs, the shell that meant 0. Dear traveler, have earned your rest. All of that can stay tucked away like folded codices on cool wooden shelves. Let the world turn without you for a while. What matters now is the rhythm, the return. The idea that even without clocks you shift slightly, it has always held you, and it always will. Somewhere, you've sat with the priests. You've counted with the scribes. You've waited with the watchers. You've walked Venus's path. Now, let the stars handle the schedules. Let the gods mind the time. You, close your eyes. Breathe with the night, and sleep.